to add in a half drop, I'm going to just copy this element, zoom out, and I'm going to hold shift and just drag. And again, the sort of snap to grid and smart guides are turned on, so these elements really want to remain connected to the guides that I have set. You may find that they get a little awkward. I often wind up with like slightly off pixels, and I just go in the X and the Y coordinates and clean that up if it becomes an issue. And I'm just going to basically split that bouquet element into 4 quadrants in the 4 corners. But if you were doing this by hand rather than in Photoshop, you could actually physically cut your image into 4 equal pieces and move them into 4 alternate corners, and then create this new, you would have this new empty space to fill, to figure out how to fill in all of this negative space in the repeat. So actually, if I do this right now, we're going to wind up with, it'll be slightly off-centered, but it'll be the same basic repeat. Yeah. So it's just moved, but it's the same repeat. And if I want to fill in this negative space, okay, and new layer, latest pattern swatch. And now we have a much denser composition with this nice flow. It is creating these sort of diagonal lines because of the sort of dominance of this dark purple lily shape. But there's some other nice motion that's happening between these other flowers. So at this point, it's already much more interesting, like a much nicer flowing pattern. But maybe you want to make things more intentional, more variation, so it's less blocky looking. And one thing I like to do is Command T to select that and transform this, just flip it. I'm going to recenter that. Actually move it over just a little bit off center because I like the way it's interacting with the other shapes. And now define your pattern again. Now we have this nice sort of motion happening in the print where all these curves are going in different directions, and it's just much more organic and flowing. So that's your simplest kind of a version of a half drop repeat, where if you see what I mean, you have this line of objects, and then those same objects are dropped by 1/2 in the following line. Now you can also fill things in if you wanted to. You could do something simpler. I'm going to move this behind. You should think about how your elements overlap each other as well. So this is another just sort of straight block where you're filling things in by just overlapping your elements and having elements go over the edge of the block. As long as you have those guides locked and you have your sort of snap to grid turned on, it's going to do a pretty good job of creating seamless connection points. So this is the repeat line here. And if you turn off those guides, you can see it actually is a perfect seamless repeat because Photoshop is doing all that work for you. Now if if you got things sort of off kilter and misaligned like this, going to be able to see pretty quickly that it's not lining up perfectly. So up here you kind of can't tell, but you zoom in, you get, where did it go? You get this this misalignment here, and you don't want that. That would be a waste of whatever printing you're doing. Okay, so we have that nice sort of flowing pattern, but maybe you want sort of more overlap between, you know, your elements. So you can go in and you can add in maybe some additional flowers and things. This will also help break up the repetition. If you do this sort of only a few of these to change things up. There we go. All right, so it just adds a little bit more movement, a little bit more randomness, which is really nice when you have a boldly repeating fabric like this. So those are your basic sort of repeats there with the basic block and the half drop. The other way that you can sort of get an organic flow without this sort of you know, half drop overlapping, just turn all these things off. So you can do sort of what I mentioned before, and you can split your block into the 4 corners. Again, if you hold shift while you're moving things around, it'll kind of move it along just the X and the Y axes and hold everything in place. So I'm just going to fill in this area with elements. Just duplicating. Sometimes it's actually nicer to have elements repeat multiple times throughout a pattern, because especially if they're really bold elements like that lily, it can help prevent like overly obvious focal points that your eyes are drawn to. Let's go ahead and take a look at what this looks like. Okay, so now you're getting into a much more sort of loose and randomized feeling pattern. And we still have those neat bouquets, but then it's interspersed with this more random looking array of flowers. And if you want to just have a more open and less geometrically repeating pattern, it's nice to play around sort of with the combination of sort of a designed element and different elements in here. This is also great for if you're putting together a bunch of different little bouquets maybe, or different compositions into a pattern and fitting them together.